And in
Yeah.
the meantime, people are voting in ways because they believe some story that they read on what, on their Facebook or
And it's
WhatsApp or whatever.
and I should say it's becoming more and more difficult to discern fake news from real news
Hmm.
on a lot of these social media sites. I'd say that fake news is becoming much more sophisticated, much more difficult.
Yeah.
We're seeing Photoshop, pictures, and we're starting to see deep fake videos as well, which is going to be another really difficult thing to do,
Right.
especially when we're talking about a news cycle that's 24 hours. And when we're
Right.
talking about photos, I mean there are some very very legitimate looking photos that you can Photoshop nowadays, right?
Right.
And it can, and those photos can spread and it becomes difficult to tell what's the real one, what's the fake one. And you end up needing to have more investment in order to figure these things out. And that's a tough ask. It really is a tough ask. Now, since we're drifting off into social media and stuff, one of the things I've been thinking about, Chris, when it comes to artificial intelligence is, sort of how to cultivate this politically, right? And I'm starting to think to myself that actually voters, you can tell me what you think about this. This is a new idea of mine, so I could be completely off the rails, right? But I'm starting to think that if you're using a social media app, you should have certain kinds of rights, and I think that those should include control over your algorithm. I think that it should control. You should be able to choose whether or not you want to prioritize your algorithm to get maybe, for instance, the most trending stuff, maybe or whether or not you want to get more information that's sort of long term stuff that's sort of been floating out there for a while. Maybe you should even be able to prioritize: do you want educational content that's going to educate you, or do you want content that's sort of, again, sort of more trendy that everybody's kind of talking about? Do you want the kind of content that's most likely something that you're going to click on, or do you want to have the content in your feed that's going to be something that engages you in the long run, but maybe you don't always click on when every single time you see it? I think that these are the kinds of difficult conversations that we're going to need to have. And I think that it shows that, these conversations about artificial intelligence, these conversations about ethics are political conversations. They're just not conversations that, are included in the contemporary political scene right now. They're thought of
Right.
sort of outside of the governance of the state. Well, it's a debate that happens, among corporations. And I'm not, by the way, even saying that the government should be the one mandating these regulations. But I think that we do need to have an open conversation about how we can actually learn to cultivate these algorithms so that they work for us and that the
Right.
algorithm isn't being run by some other corporation. Because look, I don't want it run by the government. I don't want it run by some corporation either. I want to be able to control my own algorithm. Maybe you can get like a little slider and there can be sort of very broad guidelines about what kinds of things those sliders should include. But I think that, algorithms are a really big part of today's political discourse. And I think that it should show in having a really intelligent conversation about how we actually move that forward and make sure that voters are educated. And maybe we can start that conversation today, but certainly this is
Yeah.
a conversation that's very long and open ended.
Yeah, and it's certainly an interesting conversation, and I don't think it could exist without government interference. I think you'd have to have more of a European approach where, they kind of don't think that
Well, the thing
the company should have as much freedom to just do with your stuff as you want.
I mean, well, sure, like some kind of oversight body, but it doesn't have to necessarily be always the state. It probably, I mean, let's keep it real, the way that our form of government is set up today. And when I say government in this context, I don't mean the form of the state. I mean just sort of the form of our society is set up. It probably would end up being the state, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is that we need to start having an intelligent conversation about how we can cultivate algorithms, how we can cultivate
Right.
artificial intelligence to work for individuals, and so that again, we're not being told how to think, right? Because especially, Chris,
Right.
as these algorithms get more complicated, as you're able to sort of figure out more about an individual based on sort of micro decisions, and this is something that's advancing very, very quickly. I mean,
Hmm.
terrifyingly fast. We could end
Right.
up in a situation where literally one company could basically control which way you're going to end up voting by showing you or not showing you
Right.
particular information and knowing how you're going to respond to that.
Mhm.
Maybe even, for instance, like, oh, if you tweet out this or that, like say this kind of information, well, we want to discourage this information. So let's send
Right.
it to a bunch of people who are going to hate that and then are going to send you a bunch of attack comments on that tweet. Or if they want to encourage that kind of conversation, then we'll just send out, even if maybe only 10% of people agree, well, then we'll just send it over to the 10% of people who agree. I mean, this is so political. Artificial intelligence
Right.
is such a political conversation, and I wish that it was added into our political dialogue. But oh, it's not a serious conversation about politics. We hear that all the time. The stuff that's serious is always the stuff that they've been talking about for decades and haven't gotten anything done about. Let's talk about the new stuff
Right.
that's really affecting us today. I don't know.
And yeah, I agree. Those are the conversations we should have, but I don't think we're going to see much movement on it because when you look at the social media, like we like to think of ourselves when you use social media as the customer and that the company is the company, but we're not the customer. We're the product. Right? The advertisers are the customers. We are the product. And how often in a business does the product get to speak up and say,
Well,
hey, here's what I think are I should have some rights here, but we are not. The only thing Facebook and YouTube and these companies care about is getting you to stay longer on that website. What video am I going to show him or her so they stay 5 minutes longer? What am I going to show so they scroll a little bit further down the scroll window of Facebook or whatever? It's all about just getting those clicks. It's literally not in their business best interest to consider you anything other than just the product that they're serving up to advertisers.
Unfortunately, and I should say it's a tremendous waste of resources. You know, no matter sort of what you think about artificial intelligence or, you know, government and, you know, in all this stuff, it's just a tremendous waste of resources. Some of our brightest minds in psychology and artificial intelligence and computer programming are being used to make you right now, you the viewer, watch longer on this Twitch video, right?
Right.
Make you watch longer on YouTube, make you scroll longer on Twitter and on Facebook. It's like on all these things. And it's like our brightest people are going in to do that. Well, that
Right.
just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, it seems to me. And so I look, you know, again, I do think you're right, Chris. If we wanted to have those rights enshrined, like certain kind of rights to control the kind of algorithm that you get. Do you want to prioritize education? Do you want to prioritize, for instance, fact checking? Do you want to prioritize this, that, or the other thing in your own algorithm? Because I think my view is I'm starting to think that at the end of the day, that's going to be the only solution, because I don't want the government controlling it, and I don't want corporations controlling it and nudging me and telling me what to think. I want to be able to control that
Right.
for myself, and I want that freedom. But I think that at the end of the day, if we want to have that freedom, it is going to require us to rethink certain types of property. Like it just is. Like we're going to have to, you know, go back and rethink this. And this isn't something that we've never done before. I mean, people forget that, you know, property was deeply tied up with government in the feudal system. We had to rethink property in order to move beyond feudalism. We might have to
Right.
start to rethink angles of it. That doesn't mean we need to overthrow everything, but just start rethinking how we think about property in a digital age if we want to make sure that we can have rights for our algorithm, rights to control our own data and control our own information so that,
Right.
again, we're not getting indoctrinated by some social media company. And you know, maybe I shouldn't always use the word indoctrinated because the technology isn't quite there yet, but it certainly does nudge us. But in 10, 20 years, it really might be in a place where some social media company can start discouraging you from expressing certain views or expressing that view by, again, sending you to all the haters, right? Like you express something that 90% of people support, but they don't like that view. And then so they'll send it to the 10% of people that hate you. And then you get all the hate comments. And then next time you start thinking about posting something of that view, you might think twice.
Yeah.
And then eventually that gets to you and it changes your view, changes your mind. They can, you know, I mean, there's so many different things that social media can do with their algorithms to control you. And again, I don't think that the solution is just to have the government mandate some algorithm and tell you, you know, what kinds of things you should be seeing or the degree to which we're going to fact check you some stuff. Because I think that if it's too hard line, it could also end up being a really big problem. And, you know, there isn't always good actors in government either. Let's keep it real on all sides
Right.
of things.
No, yeah.
So
Right.
it's a difficult conversation. I think that we need to bring that conversation into politics. And it's something that I haven't really seen yet.
And one step towards that would be owning your own data. And it was it Andrew Yang, which was pushing for being able to own your own data.
Okay, so I have a few opinions on that, right? So Andrew Yang's view, it wasn't quite owning your own data. It was basically we'll pay you for your data, right?
Oh, right,
So yeah,
right.
so they'll pay you a little bit of money
That's
every
right.
single time that they're using your data. And look, I mean, to some extent that's good, and it's a possible like step that I'm getting money, but then I'm just getting money to be indoctrinated more
Right.
like maybe not today, right? Today there's still they can really only nudge you, but I mean, this stuff is growing exponentially. The rate at which this technology is moving. Do I really want to get paid to be able to have other people controlling my views? That
Right.
doesn't seem like the ultimate solution. I will say this, and the reason why I do think that this is maybe a stone in the right direction is because if you enshrine the idea that it is yours and that you're getting paid for it, it can build the legal framework for
Right.
moving beyond that and saying, okay, in the future, like it basically allows you to sort of reframe it legally, rethink about it legally in a way that the courts could uphold, in a way in which we can start getting a handle on, okay, how are we thinking about data, how are we thinking about technology into the
Right.
future, which could be really really good. So I'm not like against it, if that makes sense, but I don't agree with it as it exists. But I would agree with it as a stepping stone, as long as we're very, very clear, hey, this is the stepping stone. This is not the end result. Because if the end result is I'm just going to get a check in the mail for the fact that all the social media companies have all this data and they're selling it over to other companies, I'm, I mean, thanks for the check, but I would like to be
Right.
able to control my own algorithm. That's my opinion. Maybe this is controversial, but that's how I'm starting to see the issue.
And as an individual, I mean, how much are you going to make anyways? It's not like I wouldn't think that check coming in is going to be very big
They
to
do.
begin with, right?
I will say this. They do make a lot of money. They do make a lot of money.
Well, they do, but they have billions.
They
Facebook
have a
has
lot of
billions
people.
of people using it,
I
right?
mean, it
So,
could end up
but
being.
when you think about like how many
Yeah.
times do you go on Facebook, it's like it might end up to what, a few bucks or
Yeah, you
something
get
like
like
that that a
$3 a
person ends
month
up
or
getting.
something like
I
that.
do think it could give you the leverage though, so that then they could start getting creative and say, well, if you do this model that's the most clicks algorithm part of the model, we'll pay you this percent. If you go this way, we'll pay you this percent. So at least it gives you a little bit of a leverage where
See,
maybe you
see,
could get some kind of a choice out of it.
See, that's where it gets really, really tricky though, because say you combine it, right? Like you get control over your algorithm, but then you're also getting paid, and you're getting paid no matter what. Then you could end up it could end up being a kind of exploitation where it's like, you
Yeah,
know, people who maybe have lower means may be more likely to select the
right.
algorithm
Yeah, it's
toggles where
messy for
it
sure.
oppress.
Yeah.
So I mean, these are ethical issues, like at the cutting edge of ethics right now, at the cutting edge of artificial intelligence, at the cutting edge of politics, that again we have to bring into the political domain, which is not in the political domain right now. I suspect that you could find right now, because the issue isn't polarized, you'd probably find people on the right and on the left all over the place who agree or disagree to varying degree, and it might not necessarily correlate with political party and identity, because it's such a new idea, it's such an unpolarized idea, but it's something that again, we're going to need to bring into the political discussion. And I am worried, I should say, for how it could devolve, right? Where going into the future, it could end up being a polarized issue about how you handle your data or how you handle artificial intelligence, where people on the right have one opinion, people on the left have another. But, I am really starting to think that artificial intelligence really is going to be a major issue moving forward, and it's going to be one where there's going to need to be some kind of consensus. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's not. It's my guess is it's probably not going to happen, but there's going to need to be some kind of consensus about at least how we're going to need to start moving forward, because changes are going to need to be made in the next 20 years, in the next, I'd actually say 15 years.
Yeah.
Serious changes, not the minimal changes that we're seeing right now. Otherwise, things could go really bad, really, really fast.
No, I agree. I think the AI situation is going to be a big thing, and I think it's maybe even in the next 10 years, because as the AIs
Mm.
get better, that's basically more jobs and duties and stuff that are going to be replaced by software. So we're already seeing this huge movement of jobs that can now be done largely by software. I mean, even stuff that 10 years ago you wouldn't have thought, like certain jobs could be done with software, and they're doing it. And as soon as that AI can go in and just bump it up that next level, we're going to see a lot of people not, you don't need to hire humans. You buy this software package and it will do a lot of the things that you used to have humans do. And I think it's going to exaggerate this need that we're already seeing of some type of universal basic income. This came up in my stream the other day, where I guess Canada is actually apparently going to be voting on a form of
Mm.
universal basic income coming up, and it's kind of expected to pass, which I find interesting because that would be the largest scale experiment of UBI that I'm aware of. Would be taking place in Canada, because I think we're going to see that this rise of the AI, like you're talking about, has lots of implications, not only from social media, but just sort of everywhere. If you have computers can now figure out problems they couldn't figure out before, it's going to become an issue of inequality. It's going to take our already existing inequality and just make it worse, just stretch things
Right.
out.
Look, we're going to need to really rethink certain things if we want to move into the future. This is not a question of, well, we can just keep doing what we've been doing for the past 200 years and expect everything to be absolutely fine as society changes, as our relationship to the means of production and all of these other things change. These are going to be questions that are going to need to come up, and we're going to need to have an honest debate about. That doesn't mean that we all need to know all the answers ahead of time. It just
Right.
means that we're going to need to be open-minded and have a real debate about it. And I get worried sometimes when I see, especially when it comes to this debate about artificial intelligence, because we're talking about algorithms that, give people, only one side of an argument. I get worried that people aren't ready to have an honest debate about virtually anything. And look, it's difficult. Like, it's not easy to have an honest debate. Like, we love to think that that's like the easiest thing in the world, but it's difficult. It's going to require asking people to do something that they've probably never had to do in their life before, in
Right.
many respects. But it's going to be these are the kinds of political changes that we're going to need moving forward, if we don't want to end up in those nightmare scenarios that we see on the movies and see in the headlines. Because again, this has the potential to completely stall any kind of political change. If again,
Right.
everybody's only seeing one side of the story, then you can't reach across the aisle and you can't actually have a dialogue with other people. You can't persuade people, which is ultimately what you're trying to do, you know?
Yeah.
And so this is going to be an issue that absolutely needs to be solved. Fortunately, again, right now it's not a polarized issue, and right now there are Republicans interested in some moderate kinds of reforms around it, right? But how long is that going to last? How long until one side starts getting an opinion and suddenly, we have this exact same conversation in 10 years and we're getting called all kinds of crazy names in the chat? How long?
Yeah.
You know?
It's going to last exactly until one of these presidential candidates says something about it, and then it'll be instantly polarized, right?
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah, that's the yeah, that's probably about right. Until one party, until one person who is unpopular in the other party says something about it, that's when the opinions start rolling in.